Welcome back, y'all. I hope everybody's having a great day. This is going to be part 10 of the Idaho 4 series, and we are now in the process of taking a deeper look at the social circle of the Idaho 4. And we're going to pick up where we left off in the last video with Jack Showalter, a friend of Maddie's and the guy with Maddie and Kaylee at the grub truck that night, and also his best friend, who we now know is Connor Chestnut. If you missed the last video, I really recommend checking that out, at least the last 30 minutes of it, where I'm talking about Jack Showalter and Connor. That way, I don't lose you in this one. Let's get back to it. I'm going to need some help kickstarting this one. I've gotten where I really like these cotton candy Alani things. They're pretty delicious. But let's get back to it. Dun dun dun. It's my intro. So in that last video, we talked about something that is a little uncomfortable to discuss. That Maddie may have been secretly seeing Connor, or at the very least, had been in the past. It's hard to say to what degree or with how much frequency they were still seeing each other. But when I line up all the comments and the little remarks about Maddie and Connor, it kind of looks like to me that there may have been some type of dating relationship between them at one point or at one time. Maybe before she started dating Jake Schreiger, which then likely stopped because she was with Jake until that spring break in Cabo when there was the kiss. But we know that Jack Showalter, Connor's very best friend, makes it sound like it was likely more than a kiss. Like I said, make sure y'all check out that last video because this is going to get confusing otherwise. But when I say that Jack Showalter and Connor Chestnut were best friends, I mean they were best friends, not just newly made college best friends. They were kind of like Kaylee and Maddie. In Jack Showalter's second ISP interview, which is ISP number 37, he described Connor as laid back and quiet. If people didn't know him well, they would view him as an outsider. Connor is very quiet and will not open up unless he knows you. He said Connor is a great guy and knows he would not have done that shit for sure. They have been best friends since 7th grade. They attended high school and U of I together. Connor has always had Jack's back, and Jack described Connor as a ride or die buddy. So when I say these dudes were close, I mean two peas in a pod. At the university, they both joined the same fraternity, Delta Tau Delta. So they were almost always together, except that Saturday night, because Jack Showalter decided to go out to the bars, and Connor was banned for fighting. So he stayed at the fraternity. But there is something real odd about all of this. So even before I knew who Connor was, Jack's mysterious bestie seemed like he could be an important piece of this puzzle. So it bothered me even more when I realized that we don't have an interview from Connor. We have two from Jack Showalter with Idaho State Police, one kind of with MPD, but we don't have any from Connor. Not from MPD, not from Idaho State Police. And from what I can tell, that's because of the same reason we don't have an interview from Jake Schreiger or from the Koberger family. And that's because they were interviewed by the FBI. None of those people were interviewed by MPD or ISP. It was the FBI that interviewed them, which says something, I think, because I would imagine that the FBI wouldn't just single people out willy-nilly. They probably have a reason for it. I just don't know what that reason was. But luckily, Jack Showalter's interview also helps us retrace Connor's steps that Saturday night too. So that's what we're about to do right now. Retrace Jack Showalter's steps and Connor Chestnut's steps through the night of November 12th into the morning of November 13th. So like we talked about last time, despite Showalter claiming he didn't know Kaylee or Ethan, he attended the same game day party that they did, and so did everybody else, all the residents of 1122 King Road. They all went to the pregame party at the White's apartments, the party where they all took their now famous photo together. Jack Showalter was there, and so was Connor Chestnut. But Showalter said the days prior to the homicides were as usual. He went out to the bars Thursday night, then stayed home Friday to recover from a hangover and complete some school assignments. The officer asked if he knew about the sorority formal Friday, and Showalter said maybe, but he really does not pay attention to such activities. He stated there was always something happening on campus, and he does not follow all the activities. Then they asked him if he knew about the party held Friday night at the King Road House. And he said he was unaware of a party on Friday, but thought there was a party on game day that Saturday, but he wasn't sure because there were 6 to 7 houses in the neighborhood that were having parties. Showalter said he, quote, rarely attended such parties because many times there are freshmen and sophomores at such parties, and he does not like partying with the younger underclassmen. Showalter usually stayed at his own apartment, attended functions at his fraternity, or went to the bars. Remember that Showalter only lived a few hundred yards from the King Road house, in the Browns, I suppose, the big brown apartment building to the east of the house, just like the big white apartments were called the Whites. And Showalter lived there alone. He didn't have any roommates. It was his apartment. And according to Idaho State Police number 58, Connor still lived in the frat house. This was an interview with the freshman sober driver from that weekend. And this guy says that Connor was the former blank of the frat secretary. Connor was the former secretary of DTD. And he had one of the private rooms in the basement. He said Connor stayed in his room 90% of the time. And this guy said a couple other interesting things, but we're going to get back to that in a second. So the officer asked Showalter to walk him through his day that Saturday, November 12th. And Showalter said that was difficult because he was drinking all day. And I feel like he was being purposefully vague at first. But it looks like the officers had already gathered some more information and already knew some things, and they kind of backed him into a corner. So according to Showalter, Connor and another guy came to his apartment, and they all went to the party at the Whites around 1 to 2 p.m. But I actually think it's possible that Connor and this other guy, whoever the other guy was, may have gone to the King Road house before going to Showalter's apartment. Because in Showalter's first interview, he says, in this little paragraph 14, he had only been to the residence where the homicide took place maybe once. I don't believe that. When he did go there, he was pretty sure it was all different people living there. Don't believe that either. He heard there was a party there earlier that day that some of his friends went to. The problem with that statement is that Showalter didn't have a whole lot of friends. Connor was his best friend. And it seems that Connor was friends with more people than Showalter, though. We'll run into some statements that explain that. But for him to say he heard there was a party there and a couple of his friends went, I have a feeling the couple of his friends were the couple of friends that then showed up at his apartment to go to the party at the Whites. Which, if that's true, means that Connor was inside the King Road house that Saturday on November 12th. But we don't know for sure that that's the case, that Connor went to the party. But Connor's mom did back up in her call with Idaho State Police, which is ISP number 43, that Connor was at the day party at the Whites. Then she said he left the party to get something to eat. And once again, I'm going to explain this real quick. Yes, these are redacted, but I'm filling in the blanks basically using context by matching up other statements and being able to identify what some of the sentences are saying. Oh, I turned the camera off for it, but I just had a sneeze and fit. Jeez Louise. My allergies are killing me. All the sneeze trees outside are blooming. Them like white trees. You know what I'm talking about? They have pretty little flowers, but whew, gives me the sneezes bad. So in this case, I know that's what she's saying because she's completely right. That's exactly what he did. Because in Jack's second interview, ISP 37, officers looked at a text thread on Showalter's phone, which they noted was the same as the text string photographed by FBI agent O'Neill on Connor's phone. I am curious why the feds wanted Connor, but left Showalter to Idaho State Police and MPD. I don't know. But then it says, the first text was sent by Showalter. You can tell which name is which here because the blacked out spot for Showalter is longer than the blacked out spot for Chestnut. On Saturday at 4:16 p.m. to Connor. It simply said, yo. Connor replied, what's up? And Showalter asked if Connor was still at the Whites. Connor informed him that he was, and he was going to get some food. Connor asked where Showalter was, and Showalter said he was at his apartment getting ibuprofen for his back. Showalter asked Connor to grab him a couple of beers if there were any left. And apparently that was the last text between them that Saturday. And Showalter also told the police that while he was attending the party at the Whites, he made several trips back to his apartment to stretch and deal with his sore back. At first, that seemed a touch sketchy, but on second thought, I think that is likely not as sketchy as it sounds. I think to deal with his sore back likely means he was running home a couple of times to smoke. We know that Showalter is green friendly because the next morning, that Sunday, he gets up and goes to Floyd's cannabis shop right over the Washington border. So I'm thinking him running home for ibuprofen was really just running home to toke up a little. But Showalter claimed that after these texts with Connor, he did not return to the party at the Whites. But this is where things get interesting, because this is also where Showalter gets real dodgy. Remember, he just told them that he did not go back to the party and he was at his apartment. Well, that wasn't true. And that's not the only untrue thing that Showalter tells the police. But the police straight up called him out on that one. It says here, I asked Showalter if he remembered going to the frat house with Connor. Showalter replied, not really. But then said that is why he agreed to go to the other bar with Kaylee and Maddie when they asked. He does the same thing every weekend and it gets hard to remember. Okay, hold up now. That's why he agreed to go to the other bar when they asked. The question he was asked was if he remembers going to the frat house with Connor. And at first he said, not really. And then he said, oh yeah, that's why I agreed to go to the other bar with the girls. What is he getting at here? Because it sounds like what he's trying to say is that they were going to go to this other bar and then they were going to go back to the frat house together or something along those lines. There's got to be some connection in Showalter's brain between the frat house and going to this other bar with Kaylee and Maddie. When they all left the corner club together, was their plan to go to this other bar and then meet up with Connor? Y'all, if that's what was going on here, if they all had plans to either meet up with Connor at the other bar or to go back to the frat house with Showalter to see Connor, when Kaylee and Maddie ditched Showalter at the grub truck, remember, they just kind of took off without saying goodbye to him, without saying they were leaving, and Showalter was clearly confused because he throws up his hands like, what in the world? If that was what was going on, then that means when they ditched Showalter, Maddie also ditched Connor. Listen, that thought opens up a can of worms, I feel. Because really, when you think about it, there is something about the way that Showalter seemed to be escorting Kaylee and Maddie that night that's always stood out to me. And we do know that Maddie's boyfriend, Jake Schreiger, who is already graduated, he lived in Boise, that he was also a member of that same frat. And Showalter told police that he knew Jake and he liked Jake. Him and Jake were friends. And I can't remember exactly where it says this, or I would show y'all the document, but I know it says it somewhere, that at some point, Showalter told somebody that he told Maddie's boyfriend that he would keep an eye on the girls. We all assumed, when he said that he meant Jake Schreiger. What if he meant Connor? Was Showalter keeping an eye on the girls for Connor? I mean, everybody, all of their friends thought it was so weird that Maddie and Kaylee left with Showalter, even though Showalter said him and Maddie were close friends. But none of their friends seemed to know that. They thought it was so odd that the girls would leave with him because he was not their type of person. They were not known to hang out with him. But that would make perfect sense why the girls would leave with him, why they were hanging out with him that night, if they were all planning to go meet up with Maddie's sneaky link. If Maddie was meeting up with her side boy. Makes sense to me, y'all. And I don't really see any other way to interpret Showalter putting together I remember going to the frat house and that's why I went to the other bar with them. And it's always struck everyone as kind of strange, I think, that the girls did take off like that. Because we could see that they did leave willingly with Showalter from the club. They were talking to him willingly. They were chatting with him as they walked. So why would they leave the club with him, planning to go elsewhere just to all of a sudden ditch him like that? I never could really come up with a reason in my brain that they did that. Unless, he weirded them out or something, but it might not have been that Showalter weirded them out. It could have just been that Maddie changed her mind or Kaylee talked her out of it or they both thought better of it. Like, never mind, let me be a good girl and go home where I'm supposed to be. Not to this bad boys frat house basement bedroom. But I think now that's a really good question. When the girls ditched Jack Showalter at the grub truck, were they also ditching Connor? Remember, both of these dudes weren't known to have the most patience. I mean, I'm just say it outright. They're both known to have pretty bad tempers. So this seems like it could be kind of important since it's documented that Connor Chestnut was said to have an aggressive temper. He was known to be violent towards women. Now, I don't know if that's true. I just know that's what people that knew him stated in their police interviews. I think that's a decent thought, but let's keep going. The detective then wrote, I confronted Showalter. Notice they had to confront him because he was saying he went back to his apartment. I confronted Showalter with the information we had gathered, the reference he and Connor had been picked up by a frat DD, driven to get food and beer, and then dropped off at the DTD frat house. Showalter responded that would not be out of the normal, but he did not specifically recall. See what I mean about being kind of dodgy? What do you mean you don't specifically recall? Crazy to me how many people seem to be having memory troubles this weekend. But that information the police gathered is recorded in Idaho State Police number 58. The interview with the freshman frat driver who had lots of interesting things to say about the frat boy besties. He'd been told by upperclassmen that Jack Showalter was low priority when requesting rides due to his status in the frat. He'd been told to watch out for Showalter and Connor because they were known to be aggressive with underclassmen. He said Connor was banned from the club for fighting. He said he'd taken Connor to gas stations on several occasions prior to the weekend of November 12th to buy beer. He said Connor always bought Keystone Light. This guy also described both Showalter and Connor as mysterious people. He said they normally kept to themselves and did not talk with other people much. He said he did not like Showalter, but he liked Connor. He had heard stories of them fighting other people. He said frat members liked Connor, but no one liked Showalter. Dang, Showalter. What'd you do to everybody? Then this driver kid explained that he picked up Connor and Showalter from the Whites party, and he took them to Taco Bell and a gas station. He believes Connor and Showalter bought Keystone Light beer. Then he said at approximately 4:30 p.m., he dropped Connor and Showalter off near Jack Showalter's residence, his apartment at 500 Queen Road. But then right here, there's a small oddity in this timeline, because this kid said later he picked up Connor and Showalter near Showalter's residence and dropped them off at the DTD house on campus. But he could not recall the time he was requested to pick them up, and the request was not documented in text messages or his phone's call log. He said he never saw or heard from Connor again that night, but Showalter texted him at 7:30 asking to be picked up from the DTD frat house. At that time, the guy ignored the text, and Showalter texted him again at 9:30. He responded to that request, but couldn't remember if he picked him up from the frat house or from his apartment. But then he took him to the corner club. So like I said, this is a small oddity. It just seems to be a question of, did Jack get a ride from the frat house back to his apartment and then go to the corner club? Or did he get picked up from the frat straight to the corner club? And also the question of if the driver guy picked up Showalter and Connor from Jack's apartment and took them to the frat house, why was that not documented in his text messages or his call log? So back in Showalter's interview, and I really want y'all to pay attention to this part. Sergeant Hopkins asked Showalter about purchasing a 30-pack of beer and splitting the beers between himself and Connor. Showalter said he did not recall if they purchased a 30-pack on Saturday, but it was normal for them to purchase beer and split it between the two of them. He could not remember if they did it that Saturday because they were drinking all day. The sergeant asked what type of beer they typically purchased, and Showalter informed them it was usually Keystone, Natural Ice, or any cheap beer. Then this document says, I instructed Showalter to refer to the text string between himself and Connor and look at some of the communications on Monday, specifically where he was asking Connor if he wanted the bag back. Showalter read the text string and then remembered he did borrow a bag from Connor that Saturday. He and Connor were at the frat house and Connor had passed out. Oh, he remembers being at the frat house now. Cool. Showalter took a bag from Connor and filled it with approximately 15 beers. He believed he went back to his apartment because the bag was at his apartment and he had to return the bag to Connor. Well. That sure is a lot of detail for somebody who didn't even remember that they bought that beer 2 minutes ago. But if you couldn't already tell by the way the cops cornered Showalter with this information, the bag and that beer is kind of important. And note how many times that they specify that the beer Showalter and Connor always drank was Keystone. Showalter says it, and the designated frat driver also said it twice, that they always buy the Keystone. the Keystone is important. And that is because just a few days before Showalter's second interview, on December 3rd, Idaho State Police returned to the crime scene to specifically collect and document Keystone light cans and a black backpack. Idaho State Police number 133 is all about those Keystone beers, and they documented everywhere they found them. By looking at the photos that was included in this document, there were Keystone cans on the stairs between the first and second floors. And there was a black backpack found in the living room, and several empty Keystone cans on the vanity in Bethany Funk's room. There was also a bunch of Keystone cans inside of a White Claw box in Bethany's room. Not gonna lie, I did flip out a little when I first connected all that together. And I realized that the Keystone document was because of Jack Showalter. But then I freaked out even more when the crime scene pictures dropped that included photos of a black backpack filled with Keystone beer in the living room of the King Road house. And this still really bothers me. And apparently it bothered investigators too, to follow up on the Keystone beers with that kind of effort, when we know they didn't put a whole lot of effort into following up on a whole lot of things. But though I did freak out about this at first, I've noticed something over time about that backpack that really confuses me. So clearly here, it's full of beer. We can see that. And it's sitting on the ottoman of the couch. But in the Keystone document, ISP 133, the picture shows the backpack on the floor, up against the wall. It does look like there's something in it, but we can't see into the backpack. So we can't see what. But in other photos, it looks like there was an empty black backpack laying on the floor, like right here in the middle of the floor. So where was this black backpack originally, is my question. Is that the same backpack? Or were there two backpacks? Or more? Were there multiple black backpacks found in the living room? Because this one's sitting up on the wall, this one's sitting on the couch, obviously full, but this one was laying on the floor, clearly empty. But this bag is not to be confused with the other black bag, the black cooler bag that was found outside in the backyard. That one for sure is a different bag. But as far as the black backpack inside, what I really want to know is if that beer was found inside the backpack originally, or if the beer might have been placed inside the backpack. Like maybe the investigators put them there in order to see what 15 beers would look like in the backpack or something. But if that beer was actually found inside the backpack, well, I find that concerning. I do. And while the Keystone beers inside of a black backpack would match perfectly with Jack Showalter's statement, none of this means that this backpack with this beer was actually his, or even Connor's, even with the Keystone inside, because this backpack could actually be Xana's. In one of the few statements from the people hanging out with Xana and Ethan that night, this is Idaho State Police document 81, this guy says that he believed the couple packed up a couple of beers and Ethan's black dress jacket, possibly in a bag carried by Xana. So it is possible that Xana was also carrying a black backpack that had some beer in it. I'm sure carrying around beer in a backpack isn't very strange on a college campus. But here is yet another thing that gets me about this, and really about this investigation in general. Though the police did attempt to follow up on Jack and Connor's beer purchase, they did not do it very thoroughly. Idaho State Police number 121 quotes Connor's interview with the FBI, which apparently took place on November 18th, but we do not have the report on that, obviously. But it does quote it here. At 4:30 p.m., Connor got a text from Showalter that Showalter had gone home to take ibuprofen and stretch his back because his back was bothering him. Showalter had been hunting recently, and his back was sore from carrying his gear. Oh yeah, that reminds me. I forgot to mention, Jack Showalter is an expert hunter, an expert huntsman. He's like a big game hunter. I think his whole family is. I've heard they even take like big fancy hunting trips, like exotic hunting trips to other countries. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but that is what I've heard. But I know for sure that Showalter absolutely is a hunter, and he took hunting trips pretty often, which means he was pretty good with hunting weapons. That's good to know. But then it says, shortly thereafter, Connor left the Whites and met up with Showalter. They went to McDonald's, and I'm assuming the gas station near it. It's redacted, where they got a case of beer. So Connor told them that they went to McDonald's and then to get the beer. So the cops went to that gas station, I'm assuming by McDonald's, and they reviewed all the footage, and they did not see Showalter or Connor buy beer. They never even saw them go into that store. So then the investigators went to McDonald's and they reviewed the McDonald's footage. They reviewed the cameras from inside the store and from the drive-thru, and they didn't see either of them or a car fitting the description. So I think it's concluded generally that they did not purchase Keystone beer that day. However, according to the sober driver that drove them there, he took them to Taco Bell, not McDonald's, and also very likely named a different gas station. It's redacted, so I can't really tell, but I'm assuming a gas station near Taco Bell, not a gas station near the McDonald's they did not go to. This was an ISP number 58. But they followed up on where the drunk guy said they went, not where the sober guy said he took them. Come on, guys. Did y'all even try to investigate? But some will argue that Showalter and Connor didn't even really buy Keystone that night because the police did not find the footage. But please know that's because they weren't looking in the right place. So maybe this Keystone beer in the King Road house was theirs. Maybe it wasn't. But it is interesting to me how many cans of it were found in Bethany's room. Not really a girly drink, and especially with the White Claw can sitting right next to it. I mean, maybe that doesn't prove anything except that at some point Bethany had a guy in her room, but I don't know. So many strange little details in this case. But back to Showalter's interview. After the Keystone beer thing, Showalter said he didn't see Connor again that day or night because he went to the bars and Connor did not. The police asked how he got from his apartment to the club, and he responded probably a DD. They asked if Showalter recalled the clothes that Connor was wearing that day, and he said no. It is noteworthy to me just how much of Showalter's second interview revolved around Connor Chestnut. But to sum this up so far, now we know that Jack Showalter and Connor Chestnut attended the party at the Whites. They were then picked up by DD, taken to get food and beer, and then brought back to Showalter's apartment for just a little while, though, because then a little later they were picked up from the apartment and taken to the frat house. That spot is still a little confusing because the DD said that he dropped them off at Jack Showalter's apartment and then picked them up again and took them to the frat. But the police confronted Showalter with the information about them getting food and beer and then getting dropped off at the frat. So, who's right here? Remember that the driver also said he took Showalter to the club after he asked to be picked up at 9:30. But the guy said he didn't remember if he picked him up from the frat or his apartment. But the guy also said that Showalter texted him at 7:30 to be picked up from the frat and that the guy ignored his text. So if Showalter did go back to his own apartment before going to the club, how'd he get there? Who took him from the frat to his apartment for the DD to pick him up at his apartment and take him to the club? But supposedly at 9:30, Showalter was picked up and he was taken to the corner club. Connor was still at the frat. He did not go to the club because he cannot go to the club. In Showalter's first Idaho State Police interview, which was ISP Document 1, Showalter said he ran into Maddie at the corner club. Maddie and Kaylee were going to leave the bar to go to John's Alley and asked him if he wanted to go with them. On the way to John's Alley, Maddie and Kaylee decided to get food at the grub truck instead. He was at the grub truck with them, but was hanging out in the back because he wasn't getting any food. Someone in a silver sedan picked up Maddie and Kaylee. He assumed it was one of their friends. He told Maddie to have a good night. That statement is a little misleading since he didn't really tell Maddie good night. He yelled it at Maddie after her and Kaylee darted off without saying anything to him. Here's the clip so that y'all can see the girls ditching him like that.
Any sort of QR crap. How are you doing?
Sorry, good.
Oh, no. Good, excellent, sorry. What can I get you?
Can I get 2 chicken tacos?
2 chicken tacos, you got it.
What big burrito chicken?
$7.50, if that's everything for you.
Or slide?
Yeah, slide, tap, insert, facing you with the chip, any of it. Order 85. Thank you.
Can I do the big burrito, but I'm going to be really quick. I'm so sorry. Can I get it with that?
You can tell he was not expecting them to take off like that. Also in ISP number 1, Showalter said that the DD shift had already ended at 2 a.m. He had a good coat on, so he walked home. He thought it took him about 20 to 30 minutes to walk home from the grub truck. He got home around 3 a.m. and went to bed. He showed on a map the way that he walked home, and the way he described did not pass the residence of the homicide scene. I really think that says something as well. You know, Showalter swears that him and Maddie were close friends, but if they were really close friends and Kaylee and Maddie were getting a ride home and Showalter was basically their next door neighbor, they would have just let him ride with them. But they didn't. There's got to be a reason for that. Now, I have heard several times the rumor that Jack Showalter left town that same night and that he drove to his parents' hunting cabin. But that is not true, because Showalter said the next morning he woke up around 10 a.m. to watch football and then left his house and went to Floyd's, a dispensary across the border in Washington. He mentioned he thought it was weird because he drove past the scene on his way to Floyd's and didn't see any police or anything out of the ordinary. And we do know that Showalter did go to Floyd's. The cameras showed him parking in front of the store and exiting a black BMW at 10:49 a.m. So he definitely didn't leave town. Showalter was still in town because the cameras caught him at the dispensary. But Showalter said that after he returned to his apartment, Connor called. And I think that this is saying that Connor was with Mason Barstow when he called Jack Showalter. Remember that MB, Mason, was the vice president of the DTD frat. He was also Xana's big and the guy that Kaylee was casually seeing. Showalter's statement says, the next contact Showalter had with Connor was Sunday morning sometime. Blank was with Connor, driving to get some food, and asked what was going on down the street from his apartment. Based on the size of these spaces, I think this could be saying that Mason called Showalter, not Connor. And I believe this is Mason because of his interview, Idaho State Police number 44. He says that he and Blank, this space is likely Connor, went to get food at McDonald's and checked on the guys at blank and blank. I don't know, I'm assuming maybe the area of the King Road house. While getting food with Blank, Blank was doing all right. They talked back and forth about getting a hold of Xana, speculating that maybe she was talking to police. Xana does tie heavily into this little group here, but we're going to talk about that more in the next video because I don't want to get too off track in this one. But it's interesting that MB, Mason, seems to be pretty good friends with Connor, yet he doesn't say one word about Maddie. Not to mention he's hooking up with Kaylee, and he doesn't mention Kaylee or Maddie, just Xana. Like Xana was the only one he was worried about. I don't understand why so many people seem to be putting some kind of distance between themselves and some of the victims. But I don't know. Sometimes it's what people don't say that really sticks out to me. But according to Mason, on November 13th, between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m., Blank got a hold of him and told him something had happened at Xana's house and to do a head count. I can't say who this blank space is. I really can't tell. But whoever it was, Mason is saying that between 11 and 12, that the frat houses were already being alerted that something was wrong, even though the police weren't alerted that something was wrong until 11:56. Then he said a head count is a sprint through the house for people to count their pledge class and make sure they can get a hold of everyone. Lyndon Beck was the only house member they could not get a hold of during head count because he was with the people who found the bodies. Remember that Lyndon was Josie's boyfriend. Josie was Emily Lawrence's roommate, and Lyndon and Josie went with Hunter and Emily to the King Road house that morning after Dylan called. But in Mason's interview, they then asked him about Connor, and you can tell because of all the following statements. And Mason said that Connor was present during the head count that morning. So that morning, November 13th, 2022, according to the boys of Delta Tau Delta, Jack Showalter was alerted that something was wrong at the King Road house by Connor Chestnut and Mason Barstow, who were alerted by another unknown Delt. But who alerted that guy? I'd really like to know how many people were aware that something was very, very wrong before the police did. Because it almost seems like these kids had like a phone tree going on. They were already calling each other before the law ever knew to show up. But back in his first interview, which took place on November 16th, Showalter told the police he heard a lot of people were packing up and leaving. He felt jumpy, even leaving his apartment and walking out to his car. He would be able to do his classes online, so he packed up the next day, Monday, November 14th, and he left. And Mason also said in his interview that by Monday, almost everyone had gone home. So that is the timeline that we have for Jack Showalter and Connor Chestnut. Just as best we can pin it down. But just like Jack number 1, Jack number 2 also had something concerning found in his residence. And by something concerning, I mean he had blood in his apartment. On November 23rd, 2022, MPD was granted a search warrant for Jack Showalter's apartment at 500 Queen Road. The police first noticed red spots on November 15th outside the door that appeared to be rust spots from the metal roof. But here it says, I observed what appeared to be a different fluid spot on the door approximately 8 inches up from the bottom of the door under the doorknob. I also noticed the deadbolt plating was clean, polished silver, and had no dirt on it. They noted that the spot of dried fluid on the door displayed similar characteristics to that of dried blood, and that the spot also displayed a similar drop pattern to the blood spots found on the banister wall and the wall on the stairwell to the ground floor inside 1122 King Road. Police first got a search warrant for only the door. Access to the residence would only be granted if a presumptive blood test on the spot came back positive, and it did not, so the warrant was returned. But then, on November 23rd, a maintenance worker called Moscow Police Department. The worker told me he and another maintenance worker entered the apartment on November 22nd, 2022, in order to check on a water quality complaint made by the tenant. Both men checked the kitchen and did not notice any issues. He said he entered the only bathroom in the residence and began to inspect the drain when the other maintenance worker advised there appeared to be blood on the shower curtain. He said he looked and discovered what appeared to be 2 separate smudge marks on the shower curtain, which appeared to be dried blood. He described the smudges as 1 inch by 1 inch. He said he then noticed another smudge of what appeared to be dried blood on the toilet flusher handle. He added there appeared to be spatter of dried blood near the light switch on the interior wall of the bathroom. I asked him to describe the marks. He told me they appeared to be reddish, brown in color, and added, I've seen dried blood before. And the marks appeared to be similar to that. He added the only thing he did in the restroom was flush the toilet in order to check the water quality. He said the toilet appeared clean, but became clogged when he flushed it. He noted it was odd the toilet became clogged. He said he and his counterpart then left the apartment. I asked him if anyone else had reason or means to access the apartment besides he or Showalter between the time he left and the current time, and the maintenance worker said no. So then the investigators got the search warrant. We discovered the blood smears and spots in the locations described. In addition, there were more blood spatter spots on the wall on the entryway into the living room. Samples of each were collected, 94 in total. Now, 94 sounds like a lot of blood, but don't freak out yet, because a correction was later issued, which is MPD number 288, which explains that the 94 was a typo. And like we know, it's not surprising for MPD to have some typos. This was meant to be 4, not 94. But the problem I have with this is they describe more than 4 spots in their report. 2 separate smudges on the shower curtain, dried blood on the toilet flusher handle, spatter on the wall of the bathroom near the light switch. That's 4 right there. But then it also says they found more blood spatter spots on the wall on the entryway into the living room. So what did they not take samples of? If they only took 4, they didn't take samples of every spot. But this particular document also reports something else of concern. It notes that after the video canvas of the neighborhood, when all the footage was being reviewed, they noticed something in the Linda Lane footage. It says, at approximately 3:50 a.m. on 11/13/22, per the timestamp on the video, a figure clad in dark clothing can be seen walking from the building which houses 500 Queen Road, and I'm assuming Showalter's apartment. The figure walks to the west out of the parking lot and leaves the frame of the video as the figure enters the sidewalk area between the 2 other apartment buildings at 500 Queen Road. The terminus of this sidewalk is immediately east of 1122 King Road. The figure is not captured by the cameras any further. I meant to do this before I sat down today, but I didn't. But I am going to try to go through that footage and see if I can catch the figure they're talking about. Because we do have footage from the Linda Lane camera. But now that I'm thinking about it, there might have been 2 Linda Lane cameras. I don't know. I'm going to see. If I can find the clip, I'll put it here. If I can't find it, then I won't. But I also do not know if this figure in black clothing was ever identified. I don't know what was ever done about this. However, when it comes to the blood spots in the apartment, ISP Labs does show us that the blood swabs from his apartment were tested. This is lab number 13. And it says here that the DNA profiles from items 38 and 39 matched the reference sample of blank. It's redacted. But the next line shows his name anyway, John Showalter. So the blood spots belonged to Jack Showalter. That's what it appears to say. But I have some questions about this. And I'm going to tell y'all right now, what we're about to go over, I actually never realized before last night when I was writing this up, when I was mapping this out. It's the first time that I caught this. And I'm still pretty alarmed about it. Please pay attention, okay? And tell me what y'all think when we get through this little section, because what did I stumble across here? So when we are looking at these labs, you can tell what each item number is by flipping to the first page, where it gives a little description of each of the evidence items. Like the blood in Jack Decor's apartment is item 37.1 and 37.2, and it gives a short little explanation of where the swab was found. Then you can also match those to the item numbers on the state's exhibit list. Using this example, lab item 37 is the swabs from Jack Decor's apartment, and all these things match up. But I've noticed there's something sketchy about Jack Showalter's item numbers. In the same lab, items 38 and 39 that matched Showalter's DNA is listed as submitted swabs, agency item 264 and 261 from scene. Notice that Jack Decor's items had swabs from hallway wall, swabs from kitchen wall at his address and his apartment. The ones attributed to Jack Showalter say from scene. And it also specifies a different agency number that goes along with it as well. Agency item 264 and agency item 261. Well, if we run over to the state's exhibit list, it does say MPD item 261 and MPD item 264. 500 Queen Road, the shower curtain in the living room wall, lab item 39 and lab item 38. All those numbers match up, so cool. It does say these items matched John Showalter. John Showalter is Jack Showalter's real name. So that's that, right? Well, I don't know, because here's what throws me off. Why does the item description say from scene and not from 500 Queen Road like the exhibit list says? And remember that these labs are from Idaho State Police. They are not known to make the same careless mistakes and typos that MPD does. So why does it say from scene? Like, what's the deal with this description here? Well, then I remembered that there was quite a bit of confusion about Brett Payne's renumbering of the evidence, something that caused significant confusion even with the state experts. Exhibit S9 is the expert disclosure of the state's expert bloodstain analyst, a lady named Paulette Sutton. We have this revised version because in her first report, she incorrectly attributed some bloodstains to the victims, when in reality, some of those stains were never tested at all. This was pointed out by defense expert Matt Nodell in Appendix A. On one example, he stated, the misidentification of this sample may be associated with the renumbering system employed by Detective Payne. And Sutton replied that she was unaware of the change in the numbering system as it correlated to the description of the agency number in the ISPFS worksheets. And in her revised report that we have, there is a section right here on this second page concluding that Mr. Nodell was correct and the agency numbers assigned to the evidence were wrong. Mr. Nodell reported that the numbers reflected on the place cards depicted in the scene photographs were not the same as the sample numbers used when the evidence was submitted to the lab for testing. One needed to increase the place card number by 6 to correlate to the intake number, the pre-logging number, used when samples were submitted to the lab for testing. To confirm this observation, I requested the original evidence log from MPD on February 10th, 2025. They didn't even catch this until the same year the trial was supposed to happen, and compared the information to the lab worksheets. Mr. Nodell's observation does appear to be correct. The state's expert did not even know that the information on the evidence was changed until 2025. I feel like there could be ripples from that we are not even aware of yet. Because we have to consider that these DNA tests, most of them, are done on swabs of the evidence, not the evidence itself. The item itself isn't always sitting in front of them, so they can't tell at a glance which swab came from where, which is why it's important that each item has its own item number with a description. If Moscow Police Department did not make it extremely clear, super freaking clear, to the ISP when they submitted the evidence that they had changed all the numbers and that the descriptions aren't going to match those same numbers anymore. Literally, half these swabs could be scrambled. The state's expert didn't even know that until 2025. So she was writing up her reports that certain stains belonged to victims that didn't. Stains that weren't even tested because of Payne's renumbering system. So that makes me wonder, could there be a problem with the matching of the description on the exhibit list, which says 500 Queen Road, and the lab, which says from scene? Because this particular example isn't the first time I've noticed that these item numbers don't always seem to match up right, or doesn't seem to be there at all. A decent example of this is lab number 14. This is about the testing of those Keystone cans in that black backpack. It doesn't say much in it except that the bag tested negative for blood and the cans and DNA swabs were forwarded for DNA analysis. But of all the oral swabs listed, there's 9 redacted names here. I could only identify one using the exhibit list. The other lab numbers weren't there, which seems odd since I didn't have that problem with other oral swabs and DNA listed, like in lab number 9. All of these names I could find. And I don't even know who these people are. So why are some lab items not listed? I don't like that. But here's something I like even less. Back in lab number 13, it says, just going over this one more time, the DNA profiles obtained from item 38 and 39 match that previously obtained from the known reference samples of blank. This DNA profile is at least 80.4 nonillion times more likely to be seen if John Showalter is the source than if an unrelated individual randomly selected from the general population is the source. So now let's flip back to that front page and see what Showalter's item number was that they compared it to. Should be listed on the evidence description list. But oh look, he was not. So then I went back to the state's exhibit list, like I always do when I'm trying to cross-reference the item numbers, right? And I found Jack Showalter. Here he is. Exhibit number S482. MPD item 257. DNA swab. John Showalter. Lab item 1. You see it right there. John Showalter. Lab item 1. But how can that be? Because lab item 1 is the freaking knife sheath. Here it is on the state's exhibit list. Exhibit number S417. MPD item 11. 1122 King Road. K-bar knife sheath. Lab item 1. How is both the K-bar knife sheath and Jack Showalter's DNA labeled lab item 1? How are both of those things lab item 1? Am I reading this wrong? Do my eyes deceive me? Tell me if I'm somehow reading this wrong for real. Because here it is. Jack Showalter, lab item 1. Flip back to the previous page. K-bar knife sheath, lab item 1. If I'm reading this wrong, you better tell me right now. Because this has got my heart pounding, y'all. Because now what I really, really want to know is what exactly did they match the blood in Showalter's apartment to? What did they compare it to? Lab item 1, the knife sheath? Or lab item 1, Jack Showalter's DNA? Because only one of those things came from the scene. There's no doubt that lab item 1 is the knife sheath. It's always been the knife sheath. And lab number 1 lists item 1, the K-bar knife sheath. Then there's the 4 swabs of the sheath. 1.1, the swab of the front strap. 1.2, the swab of edges of the handle portion. 1.3, the swab of the edges on the blade portion. 1.4, the swab of the stains on the back. The 4 swabs from the K-bar knife sheath are numbered 1.1 through 1.4. Everything associated with item 1 is from the K-bar knife sheath, and they're 1.1 through 1.4. There is no 1.5. There's never been a 1.5. So knowing that there is no 1.5, let's flip back again to this lab 13. If there is no 1.5, then what the is this? DNA extracts from item 1.5. There is no 1.5. There is not a single other reference to an item 1.5. Was there a 5th swab of the knife sheath? What are we looking at here? The fact that right here in the state's exhibit list that we can see with our own eyeballs, that the K-bar knife sheath is labeled Lab 1, and that Jack Showalter's DNA is labeled Lab 1, and there is no explanation for this. There is no specification to separate them in the other lists. This might be one of the most alarming things I've run across yet in this entire case. I also find it notable that I did not find Jack Showalter or Connor Chestnut listed as being compared to any other DNA samples. Because just going off these labs, it doesn't really appear that Connor was compared to anything. Yet there had to be something notable about Connor's DNA or Connor's DNA sample, because another of the state's experts, Eric Seat, was going to testify regarding his involvement in this case, in which he developed a male DNA profile from lab item 6, reference oral sample from Connor Chestnut. It does not say why this is important, because Seat's involvement as well as his interpretations and conclusions were sealed. But also note that this lab number is correct on the exhibit list. The oral sample from Connor Chestnut is lab 6. So I also think it's kind of funny, but not funny, haha, that the experts, Nodell and Sutton, point out in the renumbering system, one needed to increase the place card by 6 to correlate to the intake number, the pre-logging number, used when samples were submitted to the lab for testing. If these item numbers were wrong, then item 1 would become item 6. Lab item 1 is the knife sheath, or Jack Showalter's DNA. And lab item 6 is Connor Chestnut's DNA. What in the actual fuck is going on here? Why are all of these little weird things about these numbers circling back to Jack Showalter or Connor Chestnut? Because wait, there's more. We're not done here. The sketchiness is not over yet. Lab number 4 was one of the unredacted documents. The one, actually, that revealed the identity of Jack's mysterious bestie, Connor Chestnut. And this shows that Jack and Connor's fingerprints and palm prints were taken. Jack's prints became item 4. Connor's became item 5. Yet, once again, when we go back to the state's exhibit list, item 4 is listed as a blood swab from Maddie's bedroom door. But oh look, so is Showalter's prints, right here, lab 4. And right above that, it says lab item 5, Connor's prints. Why do these repeat numbers keep happening? Because there's only one other lab number I could find in this entire list, the entire state's exhibit list, that occurs twice. And that is lab item 3. On this page, it says lab item 3 is a blood swab from the floor of the second floor of the King Road house. But if we flip this page over, the next page says lab item 3 is DNA extracts from John Showalter and Cole Berenberg. Why are those two DNAs together, for one? Because if you're going to compare things to lab item 3, how would they know which is which is Jack Showalter and which is Cole Berenberg? Why would they put those together? But more importantly, why does every repeating lab number circle back to Jack Showalter or Connor Chestnut? Maybe it has something to do with filing all of Connor Chestnut's and most of Jack Showalter's information under a completely different case number. Notice on this lab report, the case number is M2022-4870. All the other labs for all of the Idaho 4, Brian Koberger case is case number M 2022 4843, not 4870. Yet in the Jack Showalter Connor Chestnut handprint lab, the case number is M 2022 4870. And when we flip to the notes on this lab, it states, this case is the same case as M 2022 4843, just submitted under different agency case numbers. I have over 40 lab reports sitting here. Only this one, Lab 4, is filed solely under that new case number, the 4870. And there are only 5 others that list the other original case number, the 4843, and this new second case number, 4870. Every single one of those labs that list the additional case number or list the main case number plus the additional case number, every one of these labs reference Jack Showalter or Connor Chestnut samples in some way. So you're telling me that out of this entire massive case, that these 2 guys were singled out and given their own case number, that these 2 guys are basically being hidden behind a new case number. I'm alarmed. Yes. And another thing I did notice here is that the original case number, the 4843, the case agency listed is the Moscow Police Department. But in the second, the new special case number for Jack Showalter and Connor Chestnut, the 4870, the case agency is ISP, Investigations D2, which makes me wonder, was Idaho State Police conducting their own investigation? And while all of that is freaking crazy, it's crazier still that even though they took Jack Showalter and Connor's prints, they didn't even use them. It says right here, no latent print analysis or comparison was conducted. They didn't even compare them to the latents in the house or the Keystone beer cans. Neither Jack or Connor was listed on the DNA comparisons done on those cans either. So I can really only reach one of 2 conclusions with this. That either the ISP was secretly doing their own investigation or they were secretly aiding in a cover-up. Because what other reason would someone have for that? I can think of no freaking scenario in the world that would make that make sense. Not in a normal, straightforward criminal investigation anyway. And it really wouldn't make sense if you're really trying to solve a freaking crime. Because why would you add an additional case number that gives you double lab numbers? And they're not specifying the case number on each of these lab items. They're just throwing out lab item 1, lab item 4, lab item 6. How do we even know they're using the right ones? And why does it seem deliberate? I feel like that was done to deliberately conceal which samples belong to those freaking frat boys. Okay, once again, I feel like I have to say this here. I am not accusing anyone of anything. That's not the point of our re-examination of the social circle in the first place. We're not trying to identify suspects per se. We're just reviewing everything about each of the close people and seeing what we can connect. So while accusing anyone is not my intentions, I will say that these 2 dudes might be the most suspicious dudes ever. And it seems to me that if the police should have taken anybody seriously, it should have been them. Because not only could Connor have been inside the King Road house that day, there was also blood found in Jack Showalter's apartment, but also because Connor Chestnut drives a white car, a little white car, according to Mason Barstow's interview. Says it right here. And if Connor drove his little white car to his best friend's apartment, he would take the exact same route and park in the exact same parking lot as suspect vehicle 1. The frat DD specifies that when he picked up or dropped off the 2 guys at Jack Showalter's apartment, it was in the apartment parking lot east of the King Road house. The parking lot that Brian Koberger supposedly parked in is the parking lot for 500 Queen Road for the Brown apartments. That parking lot is where Jack Showalter parked his car every day. That is the parking lot where they would get dropped off and picked up. That's the parking lot that Connor Chestnut would drive to if he was going to drive to Showalter's apartment. So maybe we all need to ask ourselves, is suspect vehicle 1 circling the King Roadhouse, or was it going back and forth to an apartment? Because suspect vehicle 1 wasn't the last little white car to drive past the King Roadhouse. Look here. Here's a little white car right here. Looks like it's leaving that parking lot, passing the King Roadhouse when the sun is up, well into daylight. When you line all this up, an unsettling picture emerges. And I really think more people should be talking about this. But I do want to circle back for just a second to Jack number 1, Jack Decor, for just a second. It's been brought to my attention that I did not give him enough credit in the last video. Turns out that Jack D is an athlete in himself. And he's also a master axe thrower. Did y'all know Jack can juggle axes? He can balance one on his head. What? That's scary. And a pretty awesome skill, I'm not going to lie. How does somebody even figure out they can do that? That they have that talent? But I wanted to mention that because now we have Jack number 1, a master of axes, and Jack number 2, a master of knives. Just what we needed. Another quick side note while I'm thinking about Jack Decor. Last night I watched Harsh's video, Harsh Reality. He's another YouTuber, and he gave me a little shout out. Thanks, Harsh. I appreciate you, man. And in his video, he compared my video to the audio that was put out by another creator. And it's really interesting, and y'all should check that out. But in that video, he said that he thought Adam Lotta, Jack's roommate and really good friend, the bartender at the corner club, went to his girlfriend's after work. That Adam said in his statement or something that after he closed the bar, he went to his girlfriend's. And somebody else said that in the comments too. So I went back and I looked at Adam's statement, and I cannot find it here, y'all. Now, maybe there is an audio of this statement. A lot of times the audio has more detail than we get in the written report. But if there is an audio, I have not heard that yet. And Adam's statement is pretty short here. And he doesn't say what he did when he got off or what time he got home. Now, I do know that another of Jack's roommates, a guy named Braden Jensen, he walked home to his girlfriend's house after they left the club. That is true. But the only thing I've seen written in the documents about Adam is that one of the other roommates said that Adam came home around 4 after closing the bar. My interest in Adam is really about what did Maddie tell him everything about. But I'm not really trying to cast suspicion on him in any way. I'm just more or less trying to place everyone. I really want to know what time Adam got home or where Adam went, but not because I necessarily think that he was doing anything or is directly involved in anything. I just want to be able to place everyone. And so far, he's the only one that's still unaccounted for. So if any of y'all can point me in the direction of what Adam said he did after work, y'all let me know, please. Because it's not about Adam personally. I'm looking kind of hard at everybody, but I am especially looking hard at the 2 Jacks. A lot harder than most other people. But let's be honest, they're not looking real great right now, are they? But I will say this. I feel differently about Jack Decor than I do Jack Showalter. I do wonder if the girls weren't calling Jack Decor for help because something was up. But I do not have those kind of questions about Jack Showalter. But without Connor in the picture, I would be less suspicious of Jack Showalter, I think. But together with Connor, and Connor's affair with Maddie, and his white car, and their reputations and their history, and then their own little case number, I don't think I like the way this is shaping up, y'all. I feel more disturbed about this than I have up until this point. The case number thing really messes with me. But at the end of the day, I think it's pretty obvious that Jack Showalter and Connor are more suspicious to me than most other people. I still hesitate to let my guard down too much about Jack Decor too, for several reasons that we've talked about, but also just for the simple reason that his name is Jack, because there is a very weird Jack theme that keeps popping up in this case. And at this point, I don't know if I'm seeing deliberate clues left behind or omens, signs, like bleeding from the universe. If we take this case as a whole, we can pretty much split it cleanly in half. There's Kaylee and Maddie, and then Xana and Ethan. And both sets have their own separate timelines and circumstances. But the word Jack spans both of them. It spans the whole case. You have Kaylee and her ex-boyfriend, who was struggling with their breakup, Jack Decor. There's Maddie, coincidentally, spending her last night hanging out with the best friend of her sneaky link. The best friend of her sneaky link was Jack Showalter. There's Xana and her mysterious DoorDash order, placed at 2:15 a.m., received at 4 a.m. Jack in the box. And then there were the Jacks, mailed to one of the victims' sororities, or ex-sororities, since all three girls had recently dropped out of their sororities. This is Idaho State Police document number 72. Kaylee, Maddie, and Xana were not all in the same sorority. Kaylee joined Alpha Phi, and Maddie and Xana joined Pi Beta Phi. So I don't know which one it was, but one of those two sororities received a very creepy letter. The envelope was addressed to the blank house via the blank. The return information on the envelope was blank and had a drawing after blank. I hate the redactions. The envelope contained several playing cards with John F. Kennedy's likeness, stamps, a cutout bracelet, several handmade drawings on a paper, a Sports Illustrated picture of Kate Upton in a bikini affixed to a card, and a note. The note read, "I feel the hurt you must be going through. I've lost too many too. Love and peace will come, but till then just know, ... In other words, there's more to the note that they did not document here. Then it says the note was signed blank. Nobody at that sorority house knew who the sender was, nor was anyone expecting a letter of that nature. The letter was taken and immediately submitted to MPD for DNA testing. So they got a creepy letter that included playing cards with John F. Kennedy's likeness, Jack Kennedy's likeness. And when you think of JFK, what's the first thing you think of? What's the first word that pops in your head? $10 says it's assassination. I don't know about all this other stuff that was in this weird freaking mail. I really wish we knew which sorority got this weird letter and what else it freaking said and who signed it. I hate all these redactions sometimes, but that's weird. And the fact that there were Jack playing cards mailed to one of the sororities, the Jack in the Box order, Jack 1, Jack 2, there's a Jack thing. I don't know what it means or if it means anything, but it weirds me out. I cannot be the only one weirded out by that. I mean, it's eerie, right? Yes, it is eerie. In the next video, I actually wish I would have done it on this one now that I'm thinking about it. We may take a small but possibly relevant detour and talk about another U of I student. Also a U of I student who lost their life at the university. A name some of you may be familiar with, Hudson Linlow, who died just a few months before the Idaho 4 in 2022. Actually, yeah, I think we are going to take a detour and talk about Hudson because it very well could tie into this video. So y'all be on the lookout for that. I hope y'all will join me next time. Thanks for hanging out with me again today. I'll see y'all next time.